I worked 3 jobs to put my husband through law school. Then I overheard him tell his mistress, "Once my name's on the firm, I won't need her." I called my lawyer. What was on his desk left him speechless. I worked 3 jobs to put my husband through law school. I want to start with a number because the number is the only part of this story nobody can argue with. $86,412 tracked to the penny across 4 years, 3 jobs, and more spreadsheet updates than I'd like to admit. That's what I brought home over 4 years, working 3 jobs so my husband could go to law school without loans eating him alive. I know the number exactly because I still have the spreadsheet. I made it in year 1 and I never stopped updating it, long after I told myself I'd stopped counting. My name's Celeste. I was 26 when Marcus got into law school. 26 and working as a medical billing coordinator at an orthopedic practice, which is a polite way of saying I spent 8 hours a day arguing with insurance companies on the phone. That was job 1. Job 2 was 3 mornings a week at a coffee shop near the courthouse, 5 to 9, before my billing shift started. Job 3 was catering on weekends, the kind where you wear a black apron and carry trays of stuffed mushrooms through other people's engagement parties while your own fiancé studies torts in a library 20 minutes away. We'd been married 8 months when he got his acceptance letter. I remember exactly where I was standing, at the stove, stirring a pot of the cheap turkey chili we ate probably 90 times that first year. When he came in holding the envelope with both hands like it was something that might go off, he read it out loud twice. The second time, his voice cracked on the word, "Congratulations," and I put down the spoon and hugged him so hard I knocked the pot lid onto the floor, and we didn't even care. We just stood there in a kitchen that smelled like cumin, laughing. I want to be clear that I offered. Nobody made me do this. We sat down that same week with a legal pad. I still remember the legal pad, yellow, the top 3 inches torn off from some other project, and did the math on his tuition, our rent, the difference between him working part-time and burning out versus me picking up the slack so he could actually study. I made the case myself. I told him 3 years, maybe 3.5 if he did a clinic in the summer, and then it would be his turn to carry things while I went back to school myself, or started the little bookkeeping business I'd always talked about. He said yes. He cried a little, actually, sitting on our secondhand couch, and told me he didn't deserve someone who'd do that for him. I remember that sentence specifically, didn't deserve. I've thought about it a lot since. For the next 4 years, because it ended up being 4, not 3, there was a delay with a summer associate position that pushed his bar exam back a cycle. I worked the 3 jobs. I want to walk through what that actually looked like, because 3 jobs sounds like a phrase, and I need you to understand it as a schedule. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Coffee shop 5 to 9. Then straight to the billing office, 9:15 to 5:30. Home by 6, dinner. And if he had an exam coming up, I'd quiz him from his outlines while I did dishes. Tuesday, Thursday. Billing office only. But I'd pick up evening shifts doing the catering company's prep work, chopping vegetables in a commercial kitchen until 10. Saturdays and most Sundays were the actual catered events. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, one very memorable 80th birthday party where an elderly man tried to give me a $100 tip, and I had to explain company policy while he insisted, God bless him. I slept maybe 5.5 hours a night for most of law school. I know that because I tracked it in an app for a while, out of morbid curiosity, before I deleted the app.
Sorry to interrupt. Real quick, before the story continues. If this story hit close to home, here's the thing. Most people don't figure this stuff out until years later, after it's already cost them something. I put together the manipulation playbook so you don't have to learn it the hard way. 49 patterns, real examples, and exactly what to do the moment you spot one. It's already helped hundreds of people see clearly what took me years to figure out. Links in the description. Okay, back to what happened.
Because looking at the number made me want to cry. Marcus, for his part, studied. He studied constitutional law in the mornings and contracts at night, and he made law review in his second year, which meant more hours, which meant I picked up more shifts to cover the gap, because law review doesn't pay, and somebody had to. I was proud of him. I want that on the record, too. I wasn't a martyr standing in a doorway resenting every minute of it. I genuinely believed we were building something. I pictured the version of us 5 years out. Him at a firm, me finally sleeping past 6 a.m., both of us maybe finally taking the honeymoon we never had. 3 days in Charleston, we'd been promising ourselves since the wedding. Somewhere in year 3, I started noticing things I filed away without looking at too closely. The way you notice a smell in a house and tell yourself it's probably nothing. He started staying at the library later, not later like 11, later like 2, 3 in the morning, texting me a photo of an empty study room as proof, which in hindsight is such a strange thing to send your wife that I should have asked why he felt he needed to. He started talking about a woman in his cohort named Sabrina Cole, a 2L when he was a 1L, then a 3L when he was a 2L, always a year ahead, always brilliant, always the person whose outlines he was borrowing, whose study group he was joining, whose father, it eventually came out, was a name partner at Kessler, Voss & Graham, the firm where every single person in that law school wanted to end up. There's a night from his second year I didn't think about again until all of this started, and now I can't stop thinking about it. It was a study group dinner at someone's apartment, 12 or 13 law students crammed around a table built for 6, and I'd come along after my catering shift, still smelling faintly of garlic and rented linens, still in the black slacks that were basically my uniform. Sabrina had made a secret seating chart, an actual seating chart laminated, which struck me even then as strange for a dinner party. And I ended up at the far end of the table, near the kitchen, while Marcus was seated 3 spots down from her, close enough that I watched them lean toward each other twice to laugh at something I couldn't hear. I didn't say anything about it in the car home. I told myself I was tired, that I was reading into normal law school friend energy, that 4 years of exhaustion made everyone a little paranoid. I've since learned that the paranoid version of yourself is sometimes just the version paying attention, and that the version of you who explains it all away is often just too exhausted from working 3 jobs and quizzing someone else's outlines at midnight to have any energy left over for suspicion. I met her exactly twice in 4 years. Once at a law review banquet where she shook my hand for maybe 2 seconds, and then spent the rest of the night with her back angled toward me in every group photo, and once at a bar exam study session potluck where she brought a cheese board that cost more than my grocery budget for the week, and made a joke about how Marcus practically lives at the library now, that got a laugh from everyone except me. I didn't think of fair. I want to be honest about that. I thought overworked, I thought stressed, I thought this is what law school does to a marriage and we'll get it back on the other side. I bought a book at one point called something like Surviving Your Spouse's Law School and read exactly 40 pages of it on a Sunday night before falling asleep with the lamp on. He took the bar in July. Results came in October, which is its own special kind of torture. 3 months of not knowing whether 4 years of my life had bought us anything at all. When the email came, 10:47 in the morning on a Tuesday, I remember because I was on my quarter-hour break from the billing office phones, standing in the stairwell because the reception was better there. He called me screaming, passed on the first try. I cried in that stairwell for probably 5 straight minutes, this ugly, relieved 4 years worth of holding it together kind of crying. And a coworker had to come find me because my next call was overdue. That night, we went out to actually celebrate. A real dinner, not a chain restaurant. At a little Italian place we'd always said we'd go to someday. He ordered wine we couldn't really afford and toasted to me specifically. To Celeste, he said, holding his glass up in front of the whole restaurant like he didn't care who heard. Who put me through this? I would be nothing without you. I still have the receipt from that dinner, if you're wondering. $61. I kept it in my wallet for a while like a talisman. Kessler, Voss, and Graham offered him an associate position 2 weeks later, Sabrina's father's firm. I remember being a little uneasy about that. The timing, the connection, the fact that he'd be starting his career at the firm run by the family of a woman he'd spent 4 years studying with. But he explained it as networking, as the natural result of law review and clerking there the summer before, and I told myself that's how this industry works. Everyone gets in through somebody. 14 days after the bar results came in. 14 days, I counted them afterward, obsessively, the way you count the days before a diagnosis you already suspect. I was home early. I'd swapped a catering shift with a coworker named Priya, who needed the money more than the day off, and I came home around 8:30 on a Thursday to find Marcus in his home office with the door mostly closed, on a call, his voice pitched low in the specific register people use when they don't want to be heard. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I want to say that plainly because I know how this sounds. I was taking off my shoes in the hallway, and the dishwasher was running, and his voice cut through it in fragments the way voices do when you're not trying to listen and end up listening anyway. Just a few more months, he was saying. Once my name's on the firm, I won't need her anymore. I stood in that hallway with one shoe on and one shoe off for what felt like an hour and was probably closer to 90 seconds. He kept talking. Something about Sabrina's father. Something about the Whitlock name meaning something by spring. Something with a laugh in it. A laugh I recognized from our wedding, from that dinner 2 weeks earlier. A laugh that had apparently been available this whole time to someone who wasn't me. I didn't open the door. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything, though God knows I wanted to throw the shoe still in my hand. I put my shoes back on, quietly, and I walked back out to my car, and I sat in the driveway of our own house for 11 minutes with the engine off, and then I called a number I'd bookmarked 8 months earlier on a whim, after a coworker at the billing office went through her own divorce and mentioned her attorney was good. Her name was Miriam Solis. I'd saved the number the way you save a fire extinguisher's location, not because you plan to need it, just in case. Tucked into a notes app folder I'd labeled, half joking at the time, just in case, alongside a locksmith and a pest control company. Mundane emergencies filed next to one I hadn't let myself name. I didn't call anyone else that night, not my mother, not my sister, not Priya, though I wanted to, badly. I sat in that driveway a while longer after I finally decided to go inside, running my thumb over the screen of my phone, and I remember thinking, with a kind of clarity that scared me a little, that the first person I told would shape what happened next, and I needed the first person to be someone who could do something with the information besides be angry alongside me. Anger I already had plenty of. What I needed was a plan. Miriam answered on the 4th ring. I told her I wasn't sure if I needed a divorce attorney yet, but that I thought I might, soon, and that I needed to understand what protecting myself would look like before I did anything else. She asked me one question that I've thought about every day since. Has anything happened tonight that you can't unhear? I said yes. She said, then come in tomorrow morning, and until then, don't confront him, don't accuse him, and don't let him know you know anything at all. That was the last ordinary night of my marriage, and I didn't sleep through a single minute of it. I met Miriam at 9 the next morning, in an office with a view of the parking structure and a box of tissues angled toward the client chair, like they got a lot of use. I told her everything. The 4 years, the 3 jobs, the $86 $6,000, Sabrina Cole, the phone call, the word her that I hadn't been named in. Miriam listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad that made me think, absurdly, of the yellow legal pad from our kitchen table 5 years earlier, the one where we'd planned all of this out like it was a business proposal. Here's what I need you to understand, Miriam said when I was done. In this state, what he earned during the marriage, his degree, his signing bonus, his future earning capacity as an attorney, some of that is marital property, built on marital labor. Your labor. That's not nothing. But we don't file today. Filing today, on raw emotion, before we know what accounts exist, before we know what he's planning, hands him the advantage. We need 3 things first: documentation, a forensic picture of the money, and timing. She looked at me over her glasses. You're going to have to go home tonight and act like nothing happened. Can you do that? I told her I'd been doing dishes with a straight face through 4 years of exhaustion. I could do this too. The next 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. Living inside a marriage that looked, from the outside, exactly like it had the week before, while quietly building the case that would end it. Miriam connected me with a forensic accountant named Owen Tran, a soft-spoken man who worked out of a converted garage office and asked for 3 years of bank statements, tax returns, and credit card records like he was ordering a sandwich, completely unbothered by what those numbers were about to reveal. I met Owen in person exactly once, at the start, in the converted garage office Miriam had described. It smelled like fresh coffee and printer toner, and he had 3 monitors arranged in a shallow arc, one of them displaying what looked like a spreadsheet with more tabs than I could count. He was unhurried in a way that should have annoyed me, given how urgently I felt everything by that point, but instead, it steadied me. Here was a man who was going to take his time getting this exactly right, and exactly right was the only version of this I wanted. People think forensic accounting is dramatic, he told me, sliding a stack of blank authorization forms across the desk for me to sign. It's not. It's just patience and arithmetic. Most people who hide money aren't as clever as they think. They're just betting nobody's going to look. I signed everything he needed and drove home, and for the first time in 6 weeks, let myself hope that patience and arithmetic might actually be enough. The first thing Owen found took him 4 days. A checking account at a bank we didn't use, opened 9 months earlier. 9 months, right around when Marcus started his 3L clerkship at Kessler, Voss & Graham, with an opening deposit of $6,000 transferred from our joint savings under a note that read, moving expenses, though we hadn't moved anywhere. Over the following months, the account had received 4 more transfers, totaling $41,000 pulled from money that included, Owen was careful to point out, a chunk of my own catering and coffee shop income that got deposited into our joint account every week. I remember reading that number, 41,000, sitting at my kitchen table with the same laptop I used to track my hours, and feeling something crack open in my chest that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite rage, but sat somewhere underneath both of them, waiting. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay next to Marcus in the dark, listening to him breathe, evenly, easily, the breathing of a person with nothing on his conscience keeping him awake, and I ran the number over and over in my head until it stopped sounding like a number and started sounding like a sentence. $41,000 was almost exactly what I'd made at the coffee shop across all 4 years, to the dollar, and I lay there doing that math at 2 in the morning, matching his secret account against my 5 to 9 shifts, 1 for 1, like a ledger I hadn't known I was keeping until someone else had already spent it. Around 3, unable to lie there any longer, I got up and went downstairs and called my sister Denise, 3 time zones behind me, waking her up, and told her only that I thought something was wrong with the marriage and that I couldn't talk about specifics yet. She didn't push. She just stayed on the phone with me for 40 minutes while I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, saying almost nothing, and when I finally hung up, she made me promise to call her the second I knew more. I didn't tell her about Miriam yet. I wasn't ready to make it that real for anyone but myself. The second minor scene I need to tell you about happened around then. On a Tuesday night, I almost didn't make it through. Marcus came home late from the office. His new office, his associate office, the one I'd never once been invited to see, smelling like a restaurant I didn't recognize, and he kissed me on the top of the head the way he used to when we were newly married, and asked how my day was. And I stood there at the sink with my hands in dishwater and genuinely, physically, had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from turning around and asking him who he'd had dinner with. I didn't. I said fine, work was fine, and he told me about a deposition he'd sat in on that day like it was the most normal thing in the world, and I nodded along and felt like I was watching myself do it from somewhere up near the ceiling. Owen's second find, 2 weeks later, was worse. Credit card charges from a boutique hotel 40 minutes outside the city, the Hallcrest Inn, a place with a review section full of phrases like romantic getaway and perfect for anniversaries. 6 separate charges over 5 months, totaling $2,290, all on a card statement mailed to a P.O. box Marcus had opened the same week as the secret checking account. Owen also found, buried in the account's transaction history, a recurring monthly charge to a florist 3 blocks from the Kessler, Voss & Graham office. $60 a month like clockwork for 11 months. I sat with that number. 11 months. Longer than I sat with almost anything else in this whole process. 11 months meant it started while I was still working weekend catering shifts to cover his bar prep costs. 11 months meant the toast at that Italian restaurant to Celeste, I would be nothing without you, happened 4 months into it. Between the hotel charges and what came next, there was a night I nearly got caught hot, and it stayed with me more vividly than almost anything else from those 6 weeks. Marcus had left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while he showered, which he never did. He kept it on him constantly, a detail I hadn't registered as strange until it briefly wasn't true. And I stood there for a full 30 seconds arguing with myself about whether to pick it up. I did. His messages with Sabrina were under a contact saved as S. Cole Law Review, which told me something on its own, that even the deception had been filed under a plausible, boring heading. I had maybe 90 seconds before the shower would stop being an excuse. I didn't read everything. I photographed 3 screens with my own phone, my hands shaking so badly the first 2 photos came out blurred, and put his phone back down at the exact angle I'd found it, screen dark, charging cable in the same loop. I was back at the stove, stirring nothing, when he came downstairs in a towel 2 minutes later. He picked up his phone, checked it once, set it back down, and asked what was for dinner. I told him pasta. My heart didn't stop pounding until I heard his car pull out of the driveway the next morning. The photographs, once I could look at them without my hands shaking, showed a text from 3 weeks earlier. My dad wants to move the announcement up if the partnership vote goes our way. Can you get things settled at home before then? It'll look better. Settled at home. 2 words that told me, more plainly than the secret bank account had, exactly what category I'd been sorted into. The third piece, and the one that finally gave me the full shape of what I was dealing with, came from something I found myself, not from Owen. I was looking for a stapler in the drawer of his home office desk, the same room where I'd overheard the call, and found a folder of printouts he'd apparently forgotten to shred. Draft partnership track documents from Kessler, Voss, and Graham, with handwritten notes in the margins that weren't his handwriting. Sabrina's, I assumed, and later confirmed through a signature comparison, Miriam ran against a public filing Sabrina had once notarized. The notes referenced Dad's timeline for announcing, and one line, underlined twice, read, "He needs the divorce filed before spring, or it complicates the optics with the partnership committee." That sentence told me something I hadn't let myself fully understand yet. This wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. Marcus wasn't going to leave me quietly, out of guilt or love for someone else. He was going to leave me on a schedule, timed to a law firm's internal politics, because a divorced man marrying the founding partner's daughter played better to a partnership committee than a married man having an affair with her. I wasn't a person to be hurt in this plan. I was a line item to be resolved by a deadline. I brought all of it to Miriam. She read through the folder twice, then looked up at me and said something I've held on to since. "This is actually good news for you, in the ugliest possible way. He's not hiding this because he's ashamed. He's hiding it because he's organized. Organized people leave a paper trail." She started talking numbers. The $86,000 I documented, 4 years of tax returns showing my income consistently subsidizing his tuition and living expenses, receipts for his bar prep course, his study materials, even the suit he wore to his Kessler, Voss, and Graham interview, which I'd bought him on a payment plan because we didn't have the cash outright. "Every dollar you can show went toward his degree and his career," she said, "is a dollar a court can consider when we talk about equitable distribution of what that degree is now worth." There's a minor scene I have to include here because it was the night I almost broke the whole plan. It was a Sunday, 3 weeks before everything came to a head, and Marcus and I were watching a movie on the couch, his feet in my lap out of habit, and he said, out of nowhere, "I know I've been distant. Things are going to calm down once I'm through associate review." And I looked at him, really looked, at this person I'd spent 4 years feeding turkey chili and quizzing on outlines and driving to exams at 6 in the morning, and I almost said it. I almost asked him her name out loud just to watch his face. I got as far as opening my mouth. And then I thought about Owen's spreadsheet and the florist charges and the folder with Sabrina's handwriting in the margins, and I closed my mouth and said, "I know, I'm proud of you," and went to bed early so he wouldn't see my face. The final piece of documentation came from something almost absurdly simple. Miriam had me draft a written timeline, not for the court, just for myself, a document I typed alone at my kitchen table one night, listing every job, every shift, every semester, every dollar, from the day we sat down with the yellow legal pad to the night I stood in the hallway with one shoe on. It took me 4 hours. When I finished it, it ran to 11 pages. I read it back once, out loud, alone in my kitchen at 1 in the morning, and something settled in me that had been unsettled since that Thursday in the hallway. I wasn't angry anymore, or not only angry, I was ready. There was one more piece of evidence, smaller than the others, but the one that finally made the whole picture click into place for Miriam, and it came from Owen's last pass through the credit card statements before we filed. Buried in a January transaction list was a single charge from a jewelry store downtown, $480, dated the same week as Marcus's bar exam results, the same week he'd toasted me at that Italian restaurant. "To Celeste, I would be nothing without you." Owen couldn't tell us what the charge was for, only that it existed, and Miriam advised against speculating in front of a mediator without proof. But I've never needed proof to know what I already knew, that whatever that $480 bought, it wasn't for me, and it was purchased in the same 7 days he stood in a restaurant holding a wine glass in my direction like I was the whole reason any of it existed. Miriam filed the divorce petition on a Wednesday in March, timed, deliberately, on her advice, to land 2 days before the date Sabrina's handwritten note had referenced, the partnership committee's spring announcement. The night before Miriam filed, I finally called my mother and told her everything. The phone call in the hallway, the secret account, the folder I'd typed at 1 in the morning, all of it, start to finish, in one long, unbroken stream that took almost 30 minutes. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "You worked 3 jobs so a man could become somebody, and now you're about to remind him who made that possible. That's not revenge, Celeste. That's just an invoice." I've thought about that phrase. That's just an invoice. More than almost anything else anyone said to me during that entire year. It took the guilt I hadn't realized I was still carrying and turned it into something clean and simple. A bill, finally being sent to the person who owed it. The petition wasn't quiet. Because Kessler, Voss and Graham's outside counsel for personnel matters happened to be a firm Miriam had worked opposite for a decade, and because the petition itself, as public record, detailed the existence of a relationship with an employee's daughter conducted during active partnership consideration, a detail Miriam included not for scandal, she told me, but because it was directly relevant to establishing when marital assets were diverted. Word reached the firm's ethics committee within 48 hours. I want to slow down here, because this is the part of the story people ask about most, and I want to get the sequence right. Marcus didn't know any of this had happened. He came home Tuesday night, the night before the filing, and told me, almost giddy, the most animated I'd seen him in months, that he'd heard through the grapevine the partnership announcement was moving up, that big things were coming Friday, and would I mind if his parents came into town for it. I told him that sounded wonderful. I meant it as a kind of private joke only I was in on, and I'm not proud of how good that felt, but I won't pretend it didn't. The petition was served to him at his office on Thursday morning, the day before the partnership announcement, by a process server Miriam had specifically instructed to make the delivery visible, not disruptive, not a scene, just visible, handed to him at the reception desk in front of whoever happened to be standing there. I wasn't in the building. I learned what happened secondhand, later, from Miriam, who'd heard it from her contact at the firm, and I've had to reconstruct the rest from what came out over the following weeks. Marcus reportedly went pale reading the cover page and asked the receptionist out loud whether Sabrina's father was in his office, which is, in itself, a strange thing to ask upon being served divorce papers, and which several people apparently noted and repeated. Friday morning arrived, the day Marcus had told me, giddily, that big things were coming, the day he assumed would be the day his name went on a wall somewhere, the culmination of everything Owen's $41,000 and 11 months of florist deliveries had been building toward. I know what he found on his desk that morning, because Miriam had arranged, through channels I still don't fully understand, and didn't ask too many questions about, to make sure it was there before he walked in. On his desk, in the center, where a partnership announcement plaque might have gone, sat a single manila folder. Inside it was a copy of the 11-page timeline I'd typed alone at my kitchen table at 1 in the morning. 4 years, $86,412, every semester, every shift, every payment on the suit he'd worn to his interview at that very firm. Clipped to the front was a short letter, 1 paragraph, that Miriam had helped me write and that I insisted on signing myself. It didn't accuse him of anything. It didn't mention Sabrina by name. It simply said, "Everything in this folder is documented and can be verified. I wanted you to have it before today, because I think the people you work with should understand exactly what your career cost and who paid for it. I wasn't there for what happened next, not physically, but I was there for the version of it that unfolded over the following 2 hours, because Priya, my old coworker from the catering company, who by pure coincidence had a cousin working the front desk at Kessler, Voss and Graham that year, texted me almost in real time, and because Miriam's contact filled in the rest afterward in a conversation I recorded, with permission, for my own records, the way you'd keep a receipt. Marcus found the folder around 8:15, according to Priya's cousin, who saw him through the glass wall of his office reading it standing up, then sitting down heavily like his legs had stopped working. By 8:40, he was in the office of Gerald Cole, Sabrina's father, founding partner, the man whose name would supposedly one day sit beside his own, with the door shut, though apparently not shut well enough, because at least 3 people on that floor reported hearing raised voices within the first 10 minutes. The partnership committee meeting had been scheduled for 10. It never happened in the form Marcus had been expecting. Instead, according to 2 separate accounts that lined up almost word for word, Gerald Cole called an emergency meeting of the committee at 9:30, 45 minutes early, and Marcus was asked to wait outside his own future. Priya's cousin described the waiting room in detail I didn't ask for, but was glad, later, to have. Marcus sitting in one of the leather chairs by the elevator bank for nearly 2 hours, refreshing his phone, standing up twice to pace, and sitting back down both times, while associates who'd normally have stopped to talk to him found excuses to take the stairs instead. Sabrina, according to the same account, came by once around 10:15, said something to him too quiet for anyone to catch, and left again almost immediately, her face, Priya's cousin's exact words, like she'd swallowed something. At 11:40, Gerald Cole's assistant came out and told Marcus the committee wouldn't need him for the rest of the day. He asked, apparently, whether that meant the vote had happened without him, and the assistant, a woman named Devora, who'd worked there longer than Marcus had been alive, according to Priya's cousin, reportedly just looked at him for a second too long before saying that Mr. Cole would be in touch, and that he was welcome to wait at his own desk if he preferred. He didn't. He left the building at 11:52, according to the lobby's sign-out log, which Miriam later requested and received without much resistance from the firm's counsel, who by that point seemed as eager as anyone to have the whole episode concluded quickly and quietly. Here is the part I do have firsthand, because it happened later that same day, in our home, when Marcus eyes finally came back, not to the office, not anywhere else, but to me, the one place he apparently still thought he had standing to walk into and demand answers. He came through the front door at 4 in the afternoon, still in yesterday's suit, tie gone, collar unbuttoned in a way I'd never once seen him allow in public, and found me at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I'd made 2 hours earlier and let go cold on purpose, because I wanted my hands to be doing something ordinary when this happened. His eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a faint gray cast to his face that I recognized, absurdly, from the week he'd gotten the flu during finals of his first year, when I'd sat up with him feeding him crackers and ginger ale at 2 in the morning. I noted the recognition and let it pass through me without stopping. Sympathy, I'd learned over the previous 6 weeks, was a door I could open or not, and I chose not to. "You had no right," he said. "Not hello, not what's happening to us, not even my name. You had no right." That was denial's opening line, and it would take him a while to move past it. "That folder was private. That was between us. You brought my personal life into my job." "Your personal life," I said, "has had a florist charge on it for 11 months, Marcus. I didn't bring anything into your job that you hadn't already brought there yourself." He went quiet for a second, the quiet of someone recalculating, and then pivoted, the way Miriam had told me he probably would, into minimizing. "It's not what you think. Sabrina and I, it's complicated. It's not I never stopped loving you, Celeste. You have to know that. This is just timing got away from me. I was going to tell you. After the partnership went through, I was going to sit you down and we were going to talk about it like adults. You were going to divorce me after the partnership went through," I said. "I've read the note in the margins of your own paperwork. He needs the divorce filed before spring or it complicates the optics with the partnership committee." That's not a man planning an honest conversation. That's a man planning a press release. His face did something that I'd never seen it do before, a kind of collapse and hardening at the same time, and the blame shift came fast after that, the way water finds a crack. "You want to talk about honesty? You've been sitting on this for, what, weeks? Working with some lawyer behind my back, digging through my accounts, my desk? You turned my whole firm against me before I even knew you knew anything. What kind of wife does that? You could have just asked me. You could have just said something instead of running to Miriam Solis like I was some kind of criminal." "I did ask you something," I said, "and I want to tell you my voice was steady here because it genuinely was, in a way that surprised even me. I asked you, every single day for 4 years, to remember what it cost to get you where you are. And 2 weeks after you got there, I heard you tell someone on the phone that you wouldn't need me anymore. So no, Marcus, I didn't ask you what was going on. I already knew. I just made sure I could prove it before you had the chance to convince me I'd imagined it." He tried one more angle, softer, almost pleading, the last stop before the break. "Sabrina's father is going to end my career over this. Do you understand that? Everything I built, everything we built, is gone because of that folder. Was that the point? Was this about hurting me?" "No," I said. "It was about making sure that if your career was going to be built on my money, the people writing your paycheck knew whose money it was. What they do with that information isn't mine to control. I only ever controlled the truth. You controlled everything that happened once it was out." He sat down across from me then, in the chair he used to sit in when we did the yellow legal pad math 5 years earlier, and put his head in his hands. And for close to a minute, he didn't say anything at all. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest thing I got, and it was, in its way, the break Miriam had told me to watch for. "I don't even know how it got this far," he said, mostly to the table. "I used to know exactly what I wanted, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, I let it happen. I let all of it happen." He looked up at me, and for 1 second, I saw the person who cried on our secondhand couch and said he didn't deserve someone who'd do what I did for him, and I realized he'd been right that whole time, just not in the way he meant it. He tried once more for something in between an apology and a negotiation, the last flailing shape blame shift takes before it finally gives out entirely. "Is there anything I can do?" he said, not quite a question, staring at the cold coffee cup between us like it might answer for me. "Is there any version of this where we—" "No," I said, and I said it gently, which surprised me more than saying it firmly would have. "Not because I hate you, Marcus. I don't, actually. Not right now. Though I might later, and that's allowed too. It's because you had 4 years of a version of me who would have forgiven almost anything, and you spent that version's savings account on a florist. That woman doesn't live here anymore. I built her a house, but she's not in it." He didn't have anything to say to that. He sat at the table a while longer, long enough for the light outside to change, and then he went upstairs and started packing a bag. I could hear him up there through the ceiling, drawers opening, a hanger scraping the closet rod, the specific thud of a suitcase being dropped onto a mattress, and I stayed exactly where I was, at the table, listening to the sound of 4 years being folded into a bag one shirt at a time, and I let my coffee finish going cold the rest of the way, because I'd decided somewhere in that conversation that I wasn't going to make him a fresh cup or anything else ever again. I told him he needed to be out by the end of the week, and that Miriam would be handling everything else. He didn't argue. There wasn't much left in him to argue with. The partnership committee, I learned much later through the divorce discovery process, did not offer Marcus a position that year or the year after. Gerald Cole, whatever his private feelings about his daughter's role in it, apparently had a firm rule about the optics of nepotism, combined with a documented dollar-for-dollar record of an associate having diverted marital funds during active consideration, anyway. A liability question his general counsel flagged within the hour. Marcus resigned before he could be formally passed over, which everyone in that office understood to mean the same thing anyway. Sabrina, for what it's worth, did not marry him. I don't know the specifics of what happened between them, and by the time I might have cared to find out, I genuinely didn't. The 6 months between the confrontation and the final settlement were their own kind of slog. Less dramatic than everything that came before, but exhausting in a quieter way. Depositions, mediation sessions in a beige conference room that always smelled like burnt coffee. Marcus's new attorney trying, unsuccessfully, to argue that my contribution to his degree was simply what any supportive spouse would do and therefore shouldn't be weighted specially in the settlement. Miriam dismantled that argument in about 90 seconds, laying my 11-page timeline next to Owen's forensic report next to 4 years of tax returns, and asking, evenly, whether the other side wanted to explain the florist charges to the mediator or whether they'd rather move on to numbers. They moved on to numbers. The divorce settlement, 6 months later, credited a significant portion of what Miriam called the marital investment in professional degree back to me. Not the full $86,000. Courts don't work in exact reimbursements like that, but enough combined with half of what remained in our joint accounts once Owen finished untangling the diverted funds that I was able to do something I hadn't let myself imagine in 4 years. I put a down payment on a small house of my own, 12 minutes from the coffee shop where I used to work the 5 to 9 shift. And I finally started the bookkeeping business I'd talked about back when I still believed we were building toward a shared someday. 3 years have passed since that folder sat on a desk in an office I never once got invited to see in person. The first year was the hardest in ways I hadn't fully expected. Not because I missed Marcus, exactly, but because I had to relearn how to spend an evening that didn't have 3 shifts stacked on top of it. I remember sitting on the floor of my empty new living room the week I moved in, no furniture yet beyond a mattress and a lamp, and crying for almost an hour, not out of grief for the marriage, but out of something closer to disbelief that I was allowed, finally, to just sit still. My bookkeeping business has 11 regular clients now, including, in a detail I still find funny, the catering company I used to prep vegetables for on Saturday nights. I don't know exactly where Marcus practices law now, or if he still does. I've made a point of not knowing, the way you stop checking the weather in a city you no longer live in. I started dating again this past spring cautiously, and found that the hardest part wasn't trusting someone new. It was noticing how much I'd normalized being tired all the time. How a man taking me to dinner and simply asking about my day, with no ledger attached to it, no invisible clock counting down to when he'd stop needing me, felt at first like something I had to consciously let myself believe was real. It still catches me sometimes, small and unexpected, like the first time this new person offered to do the dishes, and I found myself standing there a beat too long, waiting for the catch. Last month I sat on my own back porch, my porch, on a house with my name on the deed, alone, and watched the sun go down over a yard I'd planted myself that spring, and I thought about the yellow legal pad, the one with 3 inches torn off the top, still somewhere in a box in my closet, and I understood, finally, all the way down, that I had never once been the one who owed anybody anything. There's one thing I never resolved, and I want to be honest that I probably never will. Priya's cousin mentioned, in passing, months after everything settled, that there'd been a second junior associate at the firm, not Sabrina, someone else entirely, who'd approached the ethics committee around the same time with concerns of her own about how partnership track decisions got made there. Concerns that apparently had nothing to do with me or my folder at all. I never found out what those were, or whether anything came of them. Some doors you just don't get to see all the way through, and I've made my peace with that particular one staying shut. People ask me sometimes if I regret how methodical I was, if I wish I'd just screamed at him in that hallway the night I heard the call, thrown something, made it loud and immediate the way it probably would have been in anyone else's version of this story. I don't. The folder on that desk said more than any amount of screaming could have, because it wasn't an accusation, it was a receipt, and receipts don't need to raise their voice to be believed. If you made it this far, thank you for sitting with all 4 years and 3 jobs and $86,000 of it. If you're in your own version of the hallway with one shoe on right now, wondering whether to trust what you already heard, trust it, get your own Miriam, and keep your receipts.